We just balanced one of the skids on top of the boulder to give us some kind of stability so that when they're putting the casualty in, we don't move too much. They were able to put this person in with his leg had been blown off. It was quite a gory sight.
Just on 2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, left left, slim west, copy.
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just need 70, roger, report time southeast, Greenwich, for the midway, and he will still active.
So in case you were suspecting Blueskies is only about the Indian Air Force, this episode is designed to prove that you were wrong because it's all about military aviation in all its shapes and forms. We're really fortunate today to have with us Colonel Mohit Verma. Colonel Verma was commissioned into the Army in 1990 and retired after 22 years of service and over 3,000 hours of flying various helicopters in the Army. So today we're going to be talking to him about Army aviation and his journey as an Army aviation pilot. He's done some very interesting things in his career, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Colonel Verma.
Thank you very much, Ganesh, for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a delight to speak to you today. So, like we do with all our guests, sir, I'd like to back up and just find out a little more about you, where you grew up, what your motivations were to join the armed forces, and what that initial journey was like.
Well, Ganesh, that's a long story, and I will start with a very small place called Gomia, where I grew up. And my father used to work for a British company called ICI, and the place where we used to stay was a small cantonment kind of a township, which I only realized later. How akin it was to any other cantonment. So I grew up there, and I did not have too much of an exposure to the defense in any way because, except for my grandfather, who was a doctor in the British Army, there was no one else. But of course, there used to be a security officer in Gomia who used to be from the army, and one of the major influences that I had was from our principal, Colonel Sahani, who was the principal of our school. And that was something which really influenced me in my growing years. And I did. That is what his interaction with us, the way he would conduct himself. I think that is where this thought of me joining the defense forces germinated.
Hmm. And where is Gomia, if you can tell us? I've never heard of the town and I don't know where it is.
Okay, well, I know it's a very nondescript place, and it is in now Jharkhand, very
Uh-huh.
close to a slightly better known place called Hazaribagh or Ranchi.
Okay.
And when my father joined, that was the only explosives factory in India
Oh,
because
wow.
it's a mine belt and is to supply explosives all over India for
Okay.
commercial
And
use.
And was your grandfather alive when you were growing up? So did you have an opportunity to hear from him
Yes,
what his?
I have very little memories of him because I did not spend too much of time with him, but I did interact with him, and also uh, he was a doctor. So at that point of time, when I was small and I did interact with him, I did not ask him too much about where all he went and what he did, but his way of interaction with us used to be very military. He had not got out of that. It was very much a part of him. Even
Right.
the way he would deal with his children, the way things were organized at home. So that is all that I know about. I have
Okay.
memories that I have of him.
Okay, lovely. And so, did you join the army through NDA or direct entry?
So yes, so after my schooling, I did my 11th and 12th in Chandigarh,
Hmm.
and during my 12th, I took my NDA exams and I cleared NDA, and I joined NDA. I joined NDA.
And army was your first choice of service?
Yes, yes. So I
Mhm.
joined way back in 1986 and
Mhm.
was in NDA from 86 to 89.
Okay.
And from NDA, of course, the normal channel, you go to IMA for a year and then get
Mhm.
commissioned.
Right. And in IMA, what's the process of selecting the branch or the arm or the stream that you're going to be in? And what did you want? What did you get?
So if take a step back, Ganesh, in NDA itself, although initially we might go into Army, Navy, or Air Force as per our options in the beginning, but we do have a choice of changing over to another arm if you want, in
Okay.
case there's a vacancy. And after that, after clearing, and we get towards the later part of our training there in the fifth and sixth semesters or terms as we call it, we
Mhm.
get into specialized training of Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Mhm.
So the Army guys start getting a much more detailed Army training. The
Mhm.
naval cadets start going for sailing and getting to know more about how the Navy works. And
Mhm.
the Air Force people even start flying single engine
Right.
aircrafts.
Right.
So, but once you pass out and you come into IMA, that's another year of training before
Mhm.
commissioning. So, in the last term there in IMA, we are asked for our choices, and
Mhm.
in that we fill up whether it's armored or artillery or infantry, EME, ordnance. So whatever the choice people
Right.
have,
Mhm.
and a lot of people go for their parental claims. That is, in case their parents have been in a particular arm, they get
Mhm.
priority to get into that.
Okay.
So I didn't have anything of that kind.
Uh-huh.
So I opted for artillery,
Okay. Uh-huh.
and because that was one of the ways I knew that I could opt for Army Aviation,
Right.
because till that time it was only people from the artillery branch of the army who could actually join AeroP, as it
Right.
was called earlier,
Yeah.
or air observation post,
Okay.
and we call it Army Aviation now.
So could you take us back to why the artillery or army aviation air observation posts? Why was it part of the artillery? What was the function?
Yeah. So initially, what artillery does is basically, we have those guns which can fire long distances.
Hmm.
We have rockets. We have um, the big Bofor guns.
Right.
If because that's something which is known to people very much. There are a lot of other varieties which are available, and we have guns which can fire lesser distances. There are guns which can fire long distances, and there
Hmm.
are rockets which can rain down like like a barrage of rockets over people,
Right.
so over the enemy. So we've got a plethora of equipment in
Right.
artillery,
Hmm.
and the kind of variety of equipment, the technical know-how that you require to fire those is absolutely amazing.
Hmm.
And so that is one of the reasons why artillery is also one of the very popular choices amongst people,
Right.
because it gives you a great variety of equipment to work with.
Hmm.
And earlier, when you fire these guns, they fire at distances of 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, or even more.
Hmm.
So naturally, a person who's firing it can't see where the shell is landing.
Correct.
So ultimately, there has to be a person in front. There has to be an observation post, as I might call it, which is in front, close to where the rounds are about to fall.
Hmm.
And because when the round travels through the air, there's so many factors that changes its path.
Right.
So we do take the meteorological changes that might take place and influences into our calculations, but still at times it's not exactly as what you calculate.
Of course.
So you might fire the round to fall. When you fire, you might aim it to fall at a particular point, but it always doesn't.
Hmm.
So that is what the air observer or the observation post officer does.
Hmm.
He controls the fall of shot, through a process which we have. He's connected with the guns.
And so he has some protocol by which he signals, yeah, he signals correction.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
exactly. He is connected with the gun area, and seeing the fall of shot, he corrects it. He tells them that it should fall short or over or right and left, so that he can finally guide it onto the target.
And in the old days, what did they use for that air observation?
So it was like generally you have the ground observation or the OP parties. Uh, so subsequently, they realized that if you can have a platform which could go up, your reach into the enemy territory goes in that much more. So then the concept of air observation post came in, and we started using that.
Hmm.
So initially, we were using fixed wings
Ah,
as air observation posts.
okay.
So they were aircrafts like Pushpak and Osters,
Hmm.
which were used.
Right.
So, but naturally, what would happen is that the amount of observation that you can do from a fixed wing small aircraft
Hmm.
is much less than what you can do with from a helicopter. Small helicopters which have a bubble cockpit, and which give you a much better view
Hmm.
of the complete area in front of you.
Right.
So over the years, then from fixed wing aircrafts like Pushpak and Osters, we graduated onto helicopters.
Okay. So you were commissioned into the artillery. Did you first have to train as an artillery officer?
Yes. So for the first 3 years of my commissioned service, I was with artillery, and I did my basic courses. I did my young officers course, and then thereafter I did my advanced gunnery course, and got a lot of exposure in how to fire guns and controlling of fire.
Hmm.
So I'm a trained artillery officer,
Okay.
and which subsequently I got back to command an artillery regiment too. That's the one in which I was commissioned.
Okay. Wow. Which one was that?
So that was 57 Field Regiment,
Aha.
and I'm very proud of that because 57 Field Regiment is the one in which I got commissioned. And we also have the oldest battery of the regiment of artillery in our regiment,
Wow.
which dates back to 1827.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's much earlier than that, but that's what we could prove with the trophies and the silver
Okay.
that we have in our regiment.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so after 3 years of service, there was an opportunity to volunteer for air observation duties.
Or yes,
Mhm.
yes. So after that, I did volunteer. Aviation, and is something that enables everyone.
Mm.
Any human being, whenever any sound comes from the skies, everyone looks up, and they always envy the people. So Ganesh, you yourself are a pilot. You know it. You're from a background of flyers,
Yeah.
so uh, you know it so well.
Visual to show before the visualize. Just need 70, roger, report time southeast, connection, for 7 waves, and you will select it.
Okay, so what does that involve? What is the conversion to AeroP? What does it take? Where do you go for training?
Yes. So we initially apply for it, and a few people are selected. We have to go through the medical once again,
Hmm.
and also we have to do our uh, we used to call it the PABT test, or
Right.
the pilot aptitude battery test.
Yep, I've done that.
So that gives the aptitude of a person to be able to fly.
Hmm.
And why? And it's interesting to know as to why it is done for military flying and not for civil flying, because in military flying you tend to change aircrafts very frequently.
Hmm.
You could be changing, you could be flying a particular kind of helicopter in this particular tenure for 3 years, and you go to another station and you might be flying another aircraft
Right.
or a different type or a different version. So you have to be a much faster learner
Hmm.
compared to a person flying outside, where he would generally stick to one particular type of aircraft.
Right, right. Hmm.
So they do want you to have uh, your ability to pick up, you know, different types of aircraft, different cockpits,
Hmm.
much faster. So
Okay.
uh, they want you to have that kind of aptitude. So of course, so after doing that, you get selected, and the first exposure, and it's a ground exposure, is given to you in Nasik.
Hmm.
So that's where we had the School of Artillery,
Okay.
and we also had a small aviation training wing there
Hmm.
that would give you this exposure.
Okay.
So the first month and a half would go to basically just give you a background of what aviation is, what kind of subjects that we're going to go through,
Hmm.
give you a bit of a feel of what would happen once you join aviation, what your life is going to be,
Hmm.
what kind of operations you're going to do.
Hmm.
So that's done in about a month and a half, and after that, the main leg starts after that when we all move to. We used to move to the Air Force Academy at Dundigal,
Okay, wow.
and yes, and that's where we do our fixed wing flying. So we are initiated into flying under the Air Force. We used to be,
Hmm.
and we used to go to Air Force Academy, and those 6 months we used to do fixed wing flying.
Okay. Which aircraft was that?
So those were at that time we used to have the HPT-32,
Ah,
which is the Hindustan Propeller Trainer
yeah, Deepak.
32, which was made by HAL,
Hmm.
and so that was the aircraft which we used to use. And so there again we used to go, and it was we used to go through a very tense first few months, because that is the time from from ground subjects, and then you're told that now first time you're made to enter a cockpit
Right.
after a lot of deliberation, where uh, so it's very interesting that the checks and procedures which you need to follow when you fly,
Yeah.
they are ingrained into a person so much that our instructors would say that even if you're woken up in the middle of the night and you're told what would you do in case of an engine failure, you should rattle it out without even thinking.
Wow.
So that's the kind of, like, we would call it overlearning,
Right.
where it becomes a part of your psychomotor functions,
Hmm.
and your hands just do the actions that are supposed to do
Right.
without even thinking.
Right. And is this along with the Air Force cadets, or are you all doing this separately? And how many of you are there?
So we were in our batch, there were about 24 of us,
Wow.
and we had a couple of the Air Force cadets who were mixed with us,
Hmm.
and we trained together.
Okay.
So we trained together, but that was only in the first 6 months.
Right.
That was the basic flying. So after that, for the advanced flying, the Air Force cadets generally get into flying of jets
Hmm.
like Kirans.
Kiran, yeah.
And yes, and after the first 6 months, where we've done fixed wing and we've done some aerobatics and we get a good feel of how a fixed wing operates,
Hmm.
then that is the time we go to our next leg, which is again in a place called Hakim Pate in Sikandrabad, and the institute is called the Helicopter Training School.
Hmm.
So we go there and we get converted to rotary wing, and we start our first exposure. We get our first exposure to helicopters.
Okay. And which helicopter is that over there? Cheetah?
So the helicopters for a basic flying are there are two of them, either Chetaks or Cheetahs.
Hmm.
So these are basically French helicopters. Um, so the Chetak, which can carry about 7 people, is called Alouette by the French people,
Hmm.
and the Cheetahs, the original French name is Lama.
Right.
It says 315A Lama,
Hmm.
and they are actually, I would say, after having flown them for over 20 years, I think they are one of the most reliable helicopters that are there in the world.
Hmm. Wow.
You would have heard of some accidents here and there,
Hmm.
but then that has a different reason.
Right.
But if you do what is supposed to be done, and like a pilot, no mechanical machine gives up without giving you an indication.
Right.
So once you have and if you pay heed to this, to the indication that any machine gives you, I think it'll never fail you. It definitely gives you indications. So, and
So go back to if you can remember the first time you flew a helicopter. For me, it just strikes me as an incredible hard thing. The fine, precise control that you need to have to even do the most basic tasks. Uh, can you walk us through what some of those first sorties were like?
oh yeah, yeah. So, after having gone through the first solo on the fixed wing, which was again very interesting because, so yeah, again, I'm stepping back a bit.
Yeah.
So that was, the pinnacle of our training.
Hmm.
The place where everyone's looking forward to achieve that particular aspect in flying, your first solo.
Yeah.
And because that is the time you're going to be um, in the skies in an aircraft all alone, and you're free to do what you want. So we all look forward to that, and and you generally go with your instructors initially, and so it is when you go for your solo check, that's a very tense moment because after you've done your sortie, sometimes did something wrong, even in your solo check,
Mm.
and you know that now you're going to get bounced. So I don't think I'm going to get my solo now.
Right.
But but the instructors in AFA in the Air Force Academy are very experienced,
Mm.
and they actually they can understand a person so well, about his capabilities, because it takes a lot to let a person take an aircraft on his own for the first time.
Yeah.
That decision is completely that instructor's,
Right.
and if he's right, the person will come back and land safely, and if he's not, it's a matter of life and death.
Very true. Yeah.
So so these people are experts.
Mm.
So we look forward for that moment when you come back and land from your solo check, and that person, whether he switches off the aircraft or he gets down and says, "You're good to go." And that's that high, I don't think a person can get ever,
Yeah.
when you're told that you're good to go and you close the cockpit, on your own, and you realize that, oh my goodness, you're all alone in this aircraft which you were dreaming of,
Yeah.
and you can go and fly it, and you can be free. You can fly it like a bird.
Right.
You can do what you want. But of course, you're drilled to be disciplined and do what you're supposed to.
Right.
So as well, that was the first life-changing event,
Hmm.
and then when you get onto helicopter, you think that you've already flown and you are, you've done your solo.
Mm.
But the moment you sit down in a helicopter cockpit, my goodness, you get back to ground zero, and it's a different machine altogether.
Right.
It although it follows the rules of aerodynamics, but actually it doesn't.
Mm.
When you get in, you don't know how it follows,
Right.
and here you have to control the aircraft in all the three planes.
Mm.
You have a control to take the aircraft up and down. You can make it front and back, or you can tilt it either
Mm.
ways. You can bank the aircraft.
Yeah.
So, so you have the controls which can move the aircraft in all the three planes.
Right.
So you have to have that sense of keeping all these forces at play which are there in such a way that you can keep the helicopter balanced at one place.
Right.
So once when you start doing it initially, of course, it is you're just given controls by the instructor. Once you've taken off and you're flying, and then it is much easier.
Mm.
But the most difficult part is to hover the aircraft,
Wow.
to hover the helicopter. And I remember that first time when I sat down and we went for a sortie. We did a circuit, came back, and we landed on one of the training helipads.
Hmm.
And this helipad had a lot of tall grass all around it,
Hmm.
and so I came there, and then that was the first time the instructor told me, Mohit, you have the controls, so please try and hover the aircraft. So he handed over. He had his hands very close to uh, the cyclic,
Mm.
as we call it,
Right.
cyclic and collector. These are the two controls we have in a helicopter.
Hmm.
So he handed over to me, and my goodness, from that particular point where he gave it to me, my helicopter moved at least 50 meters to one side, then I tried to get it back. When it came back to the place where I was, it started going to the other side. So I was all over the countryside,
Wow.
and I just couldn't to hold the helicopter in that place. And I could see my other coastmates who were standing below, running helter and skelter,
Oh my.
because sometimes I would go over them and then come back again. My instructor would take over control, get me back. So it was such a wonderful experience that we had, and it's not only mine; it was with each and every person
Right.
who did it. So there was nothing. So when you come back, you realize that you don't. I don't know whether I'll be able to fly a helicopter or not.
Wow.
But then when you get back, everyone had the same experience. So, and an instructor tells us that it's just a matter of time and you'll get it.
Right. And how long does it take before you get the hang of it? How many hours of flying?
So I think it does not take very long
Uh,
because we've already flown. We have that
yeah.
sense of flying. But helicopters, yes, I think at least 4 to 5 sorties is the minimum.
Uh-huh.
Where you get a hang of
Mm.
a hover, because that's the most difficult part.
Yep.
And from Hawaii, when you come and touch down, pick up.
Mm.
So those are the critical,
Hmm.
um, you know, basically maneuvers
Mm.
in a helicopter flying,
Right.
which you have to be very careful
Very
of.
careful of. Right. And of course, the other thing that boggles the mind is the auto rotation. I just don't know how
Oh yes.
you can judge those things correctly. And
So so that's again, you have to have a lot of experience with that.
sorry, if you can just explain what auto rotation is for the public who don't know. Yeah.
Auto rotation is basically where the the helicopter rotor rotates on its own. So this happens when, in case during a flight
Hmm.
your engine fails and the engine is not delivering
Mm.
power to the rotors to rotate. So then the rotor should logically stop rotating. But then there's a it's designed so wonderfully that in case of that, people think that a helicopter will fall down like a rock. But that doesn't happen
Uh-huh.
because the rotors continue to rotate. So when you have the power, when the engine is working, it rotates in a particular direction
Right.
and it pushes the air down. And because of pushing the air down, there's a thrust in the upward direction,
Okay.
which balances the weight of the helicopter. So when you want to climb up,
Mm.
you just increase the thrust with the help of a collective and you start climbing up. And when you want to stabilize, say at 1,000 feet, you just bring the force or the thrust equal to the weight of the helicopter and it will actually continue going up. But if you have to stop it, you have to put a thrust in the negative direction. You have to reduce it, not negative direction. You have to reduce it to a
Mhm.
level where it is less than the weight. So the weight will actually reduce your speed of climb or the rate of climb. And you will, at a certain point, you have to again equalize the thrust and the weight, and you will be, you know, hovering somewhere 1,000 feet in the air. So, so in rotation, what happens that the engine has stopped giving power to the rotors. So now the rotors are rotating because of the aircraft starts coming down because the weight of the helicopter is more. So now there's an airflow from below to the top. And it is this air that keeps on rotating the
And
rotors.
is that pretty fast? Are you dropping from the sky fairly quickly?
Yes, no, it is. So we come down at a fairly good speed, but then we are trained to handle that. We come down at a pretty good speed. But then we continue coming down. We know exactly how far we're going to glide.
Mm.
We have an idea. Every pilot is given an idea of that.
Right.
And so in fact, one of the basic things in helicopter flying is that you need to keep on looking out for forced landing fields when you're flying.
Okay.
So that in case of an emergency, you should be within. You
Mhm.
even if you have to do an auto rotation,
Mm.
you should be able to go and land there.
Ah, okay.
So it's only in the final stages when you're coming down at quite a high speed towards the ground.
Mm.
So towards only at the last moment,
Mhm.
you tend to flare the aircraft, which gives a thrust,
Mm.
and you come up on your collective, which increases the thrust
Right.
towards the top,
Mhm.
and that counters the momentum,
Mm.
the downward momentum of the helicopter,
Right.
and arrests the rate of descent.
Okay. And then you put it down gently at that point.
And then you put it down gently.
Wow.
So that is again a very delicate operation, and that's why we do it every time we go for a training sortie.
Mm.
We practice that
Wow. Okay.
so that in case of an emergency,
Mm.
a pilot is very confident of doing it.
And so, how long was the training in the helicopter at Hakimpet?
So that was 6 months,
Mhm.
and 6 months of training there, which was a basic training, and then we come back to Nasik.
Okay.
So where we have our, now we call it the Combat Army Aviation Training School,
Mhm.
or CATS, and so we come back there, and there we are initiated into the army requirements of flying,
Okay.
like control of fire.
Mhm.
You want to carry out underslung loads in case you have to carry, arms and ammunition from one place to the other for resupply,
Mhm.
or casualty evacuation.
Mm.
How to do that with the help of stretchers? How it's fitted.
Mhm.
So then, or carry out the nape of the earth flying, where we fly at treetop levels
Wow.
to avoid enemy,
Mhm.
detection.
Mm.
So that is where we get into the operation part.
Okay.
How we would actually be flying in operations once we get back to the operational units.
Okay. And so, your Army Aviator wings, at what point is that awarded?
Yes, so it is only after we finish our flying training at Nasik.
Okay.
So then we are considered to be a pilot who's fit for operational duties. So that is when, during the passing out, we are awarded our wings,
Hmm.
and that's again one of the the highs that a person can get.
I'm sure.
Because once you get the wing, the wing's always there with you.
Individual to before the visual landing. Just need 70, roger, report time southeast, connection, speed for the midway, and yield selected.
So, for those of us who don't know, what are all the ways in which the Army uses helicopters? I think you mentioned a few. One is controlling fire, the other is carrying loads, the third is casualty evacuation. But can
Yeah,
you give us a sense for how Army uses aviation?
right. So, helicopters are a very versatile machine.
Hmm.
You can move it the way you want. You can take it up, down, left, right, back, front. You can just make it stop at a particular place. So it's a very versatile machine. It can go and land at in very small or constricted places, which is not there with a fixed wing. For a fixed wing, you have to have a long landing distance. So
Mm.
that's why, in operations, in places like in the forest, in the jungles, or forest, or operations in the mountains, or a lot of other places, helicopter operations are something that can really save the day.
Mm.
So, in the army, there are huge. It all depends on you how innovative you can get.
Mm.
About using a particular machine, a versatile machine,
Mm.
which is at your disposal. But like I told you earlier, there are certain um, preset things
Mm.
that we teach people,
Mm.
to use it. And that, of course, is one is the air observation post duties,
Right.
where we control fire.
Hmm.
It can be used as for surveillance. So you can, before launching an operation, if a person can go and have a look
Mm.
of that area,
Right.
where the operations are to be launched, it's a great thing for his planning.
Mm.
So now, of course, we have things like, satellites that can give you very clear pictures,
Hmm.
but then at times, this is something that gives you real time information. you know it can be used for photography. So if you want to plan your operations, you want to have photographs of the enemy side, or the locations where you want to go in, so you can get those photographs, with the help of, you can we had some excellent cameras which you used to use, and which could give you very good photographs
Hmm.
at long distances
Wow.
for operations.
Hmm.
Then you can use it. We can for carrying underslung loads.
Hmm.
At times, small, even guns for that matter,
Mm.
can be carried by a helicopter. I've carried a jeep
Mm.
underslung in a cheetah,
Right.
which is generally, it's again a very tricky maneuver, because cheetah does not have that capability to carry a vehicle very comfortably.
Yeah.
But then, you we did some modifications, and we were able to do that.
Hmm.
And uh, then, say you have to carry, in case of operations, you want to um, rearm your people, you replenish your people who are fighting in the front.
Hmm.
So carrying of arms and ammunition,
Mm.
or rations for them,
Hmm.
or you have casualties in the front, you need to get them back to a safe hospital.
Mm.
So, so this could be, or for that matter, transportation of senior officers who need to go from one place to the other in case of operations,
Right.
and get back to they need to go to the front,
Hmm.
see what's happening there, get back to their headquarters, go to another place.
Mm.
So at times, there's a lot of movement which has to take place in short time.
Hmm.
So helicopters are absolutely an excellent machine for that.
Okay. Wow. And structurally, were the squadrons, or I don't know what you call them in the army, units of helicopters, were they, were these assets distributed to the field units, or were they central units that were then called upon with various tasking?
So we have certain units and we have affiliations.
Hmm.
We have these units affiliated to various formations.
Okay.
And when required, then they go and assist them.
Okay.
In operations,
Hmm.
they will get attached to various formations, and that's how they work.
Okay. Okay. So I interrupted you. So once you finished your operational training, then where were you posted and what was?
So yeah, after I finished and got my wings,
Mhm.
so that's the defining thing of that you finished you're a full-fledged pilot. So I had a number of opportunity. I got a number of postings after that where
Mhm.
I got an opportunity to fly in all kinds of terrains that are available in India.
Mhm.
So the first was, of course, in Jhansi, in the middle of India,
Right.
and from there we generally would fly all around in the central part of India.
Mhm.
So, and of course, the operations were in the desert, so
Mhm.
we were um, we would fly there also.
Okay.
And so thereafter, I got posted to the northeast to
Wow.
Dimapur.
Oh boy. Huh.
Yeah, and so there it was again a great experience. The kind of jungles that you have in Nagaland and Manipur,
Wow.
it is, people say that if the helicopter goes down, you will not even find where the helicopter went because, the tree cover is so thick.
Mm.
It was a wonderful experience flying there.
Mhm.
And that too in a time when insurgency was at its peak.
Okay.
So there was a lot of action there during
Mhm.
that time.
Any particular memorable sorties you can tell us about?
So there were a lot of them. Okay, so also the weather. So
Mm.
at times in places like this, it is the weather which is more important than your flying skill.
Mhm.
Your idea, your knowledge about the weather.
Mm.
So I remember we had to go uh, for a casualty evacuation,
Mm.
and so we had to go to a place called Chakabama.
Mm.
And we took off from Dimapur and we crossed over the ridge at Kohima.
Mm.
And so the weather changes so fast there that we did not know, and of course we knew about it,
Mm.
that we're not sure whether on our way back we'll be able to cross over the same ridge or not.
Okay.
And the same thing happened, and it was important to get the casualty back to Dimapur where we had good, facilities, medical facilities.
Mhm.
So we were, that was playing in our mind that we hope we're able to take him across, and the weather doesn't play spoil sport, and we're able to save his life.
Mm.
And so we were in a hurry, and we did whatever we could at the, we took whatever shortcut you would say, or increase our speed during the descent,
Mhm.
so that we could reach there at the earliest.
Wow.
And so we picked up the casualty, and on our way back, the situation was bad. We could see the ridges getting covered with clouds,
Oh boy.
and I said, "Oh my goodness! I hope we're able to save this poor fellow who's
Mm.
with us.
Mm.
Who got a bullet wound, and he was bleeding, and it was so we were his only chance actually."
Mm. Wow.
So we did, went along the ridge, and we were looking for an opening, and when it's God has His ways, and when someone has to be saved, He will save him, and we saw a small opening.
Right.
So the opening might not be very big, but of course it was, I would say, about just about 500 meters, and it might be, so it's like a hole,
Mm.
and
Right.
then we could see that, we could see the ridge, and we could see the other side of the ridge,
Oh boy.
and we just managed to get across through that.
Squeeze through that.
Absolutely. And when we look back after we flew for not even 5 minutes, the complete ridge was covered again.
Oh boy.
So, we had talked to each other, the other pilot, that it was just meant for us to save this man today.
Wow. Amazing.
It was destined to happen. And we were able to take him to the military hospital there,
Mm.
and fortunately that guy, survived. Number of events like this that keep on happening, that, keep on pumping adrenaline.
Right. I wanted to ask you, does every unit or formation at a certain level at least have a helipad wherever they are located? And do all these hospitals have helipads so you can fly directly to the hospital?
So it depends where it is,
Hmm.
and most of the places they have. Most of the places they have it,
Mm.
and in case required, they can be built in no time. So
Okay.
it's
Mm.
so people are trained for it.
Hmm.
So in case of and the best part about helicopters is that you can go and land anywhere.
Right.
So the only thing is the area needs to be cleared,
Yeah.
and you can go and land. You
Hmm.
can go and land on top of a house. You can go and land on the road. You can go and land, uh, on top of a mountain.
Right.
So it is operations where it's actually required. You can go and land anywhere.
Hmm. Okay.
But in normal operations, we do not do it.
Mm.
It's a strict no-no,
Hmm.
and we do need to have a proper helipad, which is properly made as per the specifications which are required,
Correct.
because we don't want any untoward incident to happen.
Absolutely.
Some wires coming in way, some
Mm.
FOD getting kicked up, getting into the engine.
Right.
We don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But in operations where life has to be saved, then at times you do take a risk.
Individual to California Visual. Just need 70, like your report type southeast, connection, for midway, and field selected.
Super. So after the Northeast, how long did you spend in the Northeast?
So I was there for about a year and a half,
Hmm.
because after that I got my instructor's course,
Okay.
which is called the QFI course, as they call it,
Uh-huh.
which is a qualified flying instructor's course. And this particular course, we again do it with the Air Force
Hmm.
at a place called Tabra, very close to Chennai.
Yep,
Of
that's right.
course, you know about it.
Yes.
And so we have the flying instructor school there,
Hmm.
where we have uh, highly qualified instructors, and they uh, teach us to become instructors.
Hmm.
So it's a 6 months again, a grueling 6 months that we go through,
Mm.
and so after doing that, then the 6 months got over. You become a flying instructor there, and then towards the end of it, when I was doing my course, towards the end of the course, we got the news that Operation Vijay, or the Kargil operations, have started,
Okay. Uh-huh.
and that is the time that we were supposed to be posted out from there,
Hmm.
and we were supposed to get our units. And so, as luck would have it, I was the lucky one, and
Mm.
I got posted to Srinagar.
Oh boy.
So the squadron which was in the thick of Operation Vijay,
My goodness.
and our actually unit, half of the unit was actually deployed ahead,
Hmm.
in the area of Kargil and Dras.
Wow. And what unit was this and what rank were you at that time?
So I was a major that time.
Okay.
I was a major, and yes, so I reported to my unit,
Mm.
and in Srinagar, and from there, of course, I was inducted without wasting any time. And so, yeah, so that was the time when I got an exposure.
You'd never flown in that area before, right?
Never, never. So my flying had always been up to under 10,000 feet,
Mm.
and and it was the first time when I went there with another instructor
Hmm.
who was a good friend of mine, because we'd served in Jhansi together.
Mm.
And that is the time when I first time landed at 15,000 feet, and it was an awesome experience,
Wow.
and in a place where,
So you flew almost 100 sorties during the Kargil operations. What was the nature of these sorties, and any memorable ones you can tell us about where it stands out particularly?
yeah, so it was again, the nature of the sorties were what I've already told you.
Hmm.
Observation posts, photography. You can for directing fire. Sometimes communication.
Mm.
Sometimes carrying important people from one place to the other, replenishment.
Mm.
So one of the important sorties, or interesting sorties, I would say, is that I was undergoing training that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like because it's a different environment where
Mm.
you're flying, and also a different altitude. Initially, women you're used to flying at lower altitudes.
Mm.
So when you start flying at higher altitudes, you have to keep a few things in mind.
Mm.
So you are trained for it initially. Once you get comfortable, then you can start flying as captain. So I was flying with my with another friend of mine, and we landed at this place called 4875. This was one of the points which had been which the Pakis had taken, and so we had got it back from them. And that point people remember because that a very famous photograph of the India, on the cover of India Today, where all our Jawans are sitting with the Indian flag.
Right, right.
So that was the location, 4875. And so we just landed there and took off when we got a radio call that guys, can you go in for a casualty evacuation?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, whenever you get a call like this, the answer is never no.
Yeah.
It's just that they ask for it, and so they just want to know what's the kind of delay, or
Mm.
in case you're doing something else, either you drop it or change your plan. So we said yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us where. And so the location they told us, they said it is at the end of a nala,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave us a grid reference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that nala was, it's called the Safed Nala.
Mm-hmm.
And that Safed Nala goes in, and um, it has spurs coming down on both sides. And these spurs were actually occupied by the Pakis, and they were retreating. During that time, they were retreating back.
Oh my.
So one of our para commando teams had got in, and they wanted to cut off their lines of logistic lines and communication from behind. So they had gone into the Nala, and they had to go up a very steep hill
Mm-hmm.
so that they could surprise the
Wow.
Pakis. And so when we were told that there's been a casualty in their team,
Mm.
because what was happening was these Pakis were retreating, and when they were retreating, they were mining the area.
Oh.
They were putting
Right.
mines. So they would catch us. They did catch us unawares in the beginning, but later on, of course, we were much more careful.
Mm.
But at times, we were unlucky and we did have some casualties.
Mm.
So this was one of that.
Mm.
And one of the paracommandos, he accidentally stepped on a mine, and he blew up his
Oh
foot.
boy. Ah.
And so now these people couldn't move ahead. There were Pakis sitting on the top of the ridges. These guys were down in the valley, and they were being overlooked by the Pakis from three sides.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told that if you could go and evacuate that guy.
Mm.
So, well, the answer was yes. Now the only thing was that you keep your fingers crossed and pray to God and just go in.
Right.
So, because we know that helicopter makes a presence
Mm.
wherever it goes, it announces itself with all the whirring and the of the rotors and the sound of the engine.
Right.
So we did whatever we'd learned. We flew absolutely at uh, we did NOE.
Mm.
We flew absolutely along the Nala. So NOE is an apophthegm where you fly absolutely close to the ground on treetop level, or times even lower than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we and it was quite a distance.
Mm.
So we continued going up, and we didn't know exactly where they are. We just had the grid reference with us.
Right.
So once we went there, we told them, please indicate where you are so that we can identify you. We were told uh, that to pass it on because we weren't in communication with them. We were just told they are there, and you will be able to identify them.
Oh. Wow.
So when we continued going, absolutely at the end of the Nala, where there was a near vertical wall,
Mm-hmm.
of the mountain in front of us. And we see these people at the very base of that vertical wall.
Wow.
And when you're flying at a height of, say 16, 17,000 feet,
Mm,
it becomes very difficult for you to, hover there or to take off. The
mm,
winds have to be in the right direction.
mm,
So anyway, we approached them. Fortunately, we were able to identify the people. There were two, three of them who came out and waved.
mm.
So we were able to go there, but we did not have a place to land.
Okay.
So we looked around. There were big boulders everywhere. It was a stream coming down, from that base of that hill,
Mm,
and there was no place we could land. So finally, we came to a hover. We came close to them, to a big boulder which was there. We just balanced one of the skids on top of the boulder,
my
so
God.
that to give us some kind of stability, so that when they're putting the casualty in, we don't move too much. And they were able to put this person in with a, you know, his leg had been blown off. It was quite a gory sight, and we somehow got him in and immediately turned back and came back. So it was only after we came back, we got results when we got information from the brigade major of that brigade
Mhm.
that you guys went there, but you were fired upon
Wow.
quite heavily.
Acha.
And somehow, I think luck was with us that day that nothing happened.
Wow.
We were able to get that person out of that. And fortunately, there was a B-17 which was standing at Dras, ready to go to Srinagar, to the base hospital,
Mhm.
which took him immediately.
Okay.
And although his leg was amputated,
Mm.
but fortunately, his life was saved.
Life was saved. Amazing. Amazing.
So, yeah,
I was going to ask you that, because the helicopter feels like a very vulnerable machine. Even when you're doing your air observation and controlling fire, it might be quite
yeah,
vulnerable to both small arms fire, shoulder launched missiles, and things like that. So, what sort of protections do you have, or what
yes.
strategies do you employ to protect yourself?
So it's, we are vulnerable. There's no doubt about it. So we have devised ways of flying in which we don't expose ourselves too much.
Aha.
So we've devised various ways in which we expose ourselves only for the required moment, and then and
Mhm.
then vanish again. They're not we're flying away where we're not seen by the enemy.
Fascinating. Wow.
So because that's something, that's the amount of risk that we have to take. You know
Right.
and because the results are much more
Mm.
than what we can think of
Yeah.
by exposing yourself to such a small for such a small time to the enemy, but the amount of information that we get, or what harm that we can cause to the enemy, is much more. And that's the reason we are ready to take that much of risk.
Visual to before the visual. Just need 70, like your report type southeast, connection, for some advice, and you will
I didn't ask, but which helicopters have you flown? The Cheetah and Cheetah, obviously. But was the Dhruv inducted by your time, and did you have a chance to fly it?
Uh, Well, I it was inducted, and then later on, as when I became a bit senior, I did. It had been inducted, but I did not get a chance to fly that.
Were your any of your helicopters that you flew? Did they have any sort of weapons, rockets, or things like that?
No, we have the capability of strapping them on, but no, we did not use it in that configuration.
And how about
Yeah.
assets like night vision goggles and things like that? Did you have any of those things?
So now, of course, yes, we have all of that, and it is now Army Aviation today is much more advanced than when I left it.
Hmm.
So we are today we are our Army Aviation is comparable to the best Army Aviation in the world.
Hmm.
So I must tell you that. Yes.
Now you're going to get some Apache squadrons and things like that also, right? And,
Yeah, of course, of course. So it is, we are in the midst of modernization, and we are going to be actually comparable to the best in the world. There's no doubt about it. Our pilots are compared to the best in the world. So there's no doubt it's not only the machine; it's the man behind the machine that also matters. So and with this new equipment and new weaponry coming in, we're going to be absolutely the best.
Now, you had a stint in a UN assignment. What was that like? And were you flying there, or was it non-flying?
It was Ganesh. That was a non-flying appointment that I had, and that was as a military observer. And so there, basically, we were. I went to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and which was quite a disturbed area. It the complete area is nearly one third. Its size is one third the size of India. But what we were told at that time that the whole country has only 450 kilometers of roads, outside the city limits. So you can imagine the kind of development which was there. So, and also there were factions which were fighting each other. So, as UN military observers, we were supposed to be there and interact with these various factions and ensure that they don't fight.
Mm,
So it was quite a tough task because we were under Chapter 5. We were not supposed to carry arms, and these people with whom you're interacting are all warlords, and they have all arms, whatever arms you can think of with them. So if they get even a inkling that you are siding with the other side, God help you.
wow.
So we had a couple of military observers who were killed actually during our time because for reasons I don't know, but so you had to be absolutely fair and unbiased in your approach if you had to survive there. So, but it was a great exposure, working in an international organization with people from, like in our sector where we were working, there were people from 35 countries. So it was a great experience.
Fascinating, fascinating. Now, you also raised a VIP helicopter flight later in your career. What was that like, and how were the procedures, or the maintenance, or the selection of pilots, the operational procedures different for a VIP helicopter flight?
So I didn't raise it, I would say. I commanded a VIP flight.
Uh-huh.
And VIP flight because we had uh, the Chetak helicopters with us.
Hmm.
So at that time, now of course there are much better helicopters available, but that time Chetaks were the best that was available. They are much more comfortable. They are they could seat more number of people. So that's why they were designated as the for important sorties. Generally, Chetaks would be used.
Right. Okay.
So yeah. Otherwise, it's just that designation of that particular unit, which was used more for for VIP duties. So otherwise, it was like any other unit.
Okay. And these are people like the GOC and C, the GOC, would div commanders, brigade commanders?
Yeah. So yeah. People, the senior people, we would generally carry senior people.
Okay.
Other than our normal operational tasks.
Hmm.
So of course. So Chetaks were generally used for carrying, senior officials because it could carry more number of people.
Right.
That was one of the main reasons.
Super. So, before I let you go, I have to ask you, drones are the flavor of the month. Everybody is very excited. Drone can do this, drone can do that. You've been, man in the loop as a helicopter pilot in the army, eyes and ears observing the enemy and commanding the fire. What's your opinion of the role of drones versus manned helicopters in the battlefield?
Yeah, definitely. So I think drones are coming up in a big way. They've already have come in a big way. and they've taken over a major task which used to be done by manned helicopters. They've been taken over by drones now,
Hmm.
right? But then, of course, and I think they would be much better off in majority of the tasks that was done by the humans, because that's going to be completely electronic, right?
Right.
They're going to be their capabilities are going to be much more than what the humans had. So they are going to take up a majority of the task that was being done by manned helicopters.
Hmm.
But then, of course, there are certain things which you just cannot take away. In case of a casualty evacuation, you you have to have a person, and well, there've been a lot of cases where you don't have a nursing assistant, with you, or a doctor with you,
Hmm.
and it's the pilots who are actually boosting the morale of the injured person who's sitting behind you,
Right.
on your way to the hospital. So also when you go in for operations, helicopter, like, in fact, I would say the pilots are the most um, well trained guys in a particular in the area of operations, because they've been flying there day in day out.
Hmm.
They know each and everything about
Mm.
the area of operations. So in case someone has to be briefed about it, someone has to be taken to a certain area, you know, what a manned helicopter can do, that maybe a drone might not be able to do.
Right.
A drone can do when it is mechanically programmed to do a particular thing. But when certain things, certain decisions have to be taken at the heat of the moment, you have to have a human inside a machine.
Particularly when flexibility is required. I guess that's the thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Super. I've taken over an hour of your time. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough for your service, but also for taking the time to speak to us and really bring Army Aviation to life. I really felt like I was with you in the Kargil Valley, in that Kazavat, in every sortie that you have described in the Northeast. Thank you so much, Mohit, for your very, very illuminating conversation.
Thank you so much, Ganesh.
Visual to forward to visualize. Just need 7B, like your report type southeast, connection, for the midway, and field selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.